It was a warm summer evening in Bardstown, Kentucky, the kind of night that hums with the easy rhythm of small-town life. Porch lights glowed against fields of fireflies. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and slow-burning charcoal from neighborhood barbecues. Laughter drifted through open windows as families prepared for the long 4th of July weekend. Nothing in the stillness suggested that Bardstown was about to lose one of its own, or that a decade-long mystery was about to take root in the heart of Kentucky's bluegrass country. A mother of 5 vanished into the night. Her car left abandoned on an open highway, and the questions that followed would shatter a town's quiet peace. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. Her name was Crystal Rogers. She was 35 years old, a mother, daughter, sister, and friend whose life revolved around her family. Crystal was known for her easy laugh, her love of dancing, and her ability to balance chaos with kindness. Neighbors remembered her as the woman who never turned down a favor. She would drop everything to pick up a child from practice, cook for a friend in need, or help organize a school event. She loved her kids fiercely, 5 children whose ages spanned from toddler to teenager, and the rhythm of her days reflected that love. Early breakfasts, school runs, work shifts, late-night laundry, and the occasional quiet moment on the porch with a glass of sweet tea and the hum of crickets around her. Crystal lived with her boyfriend, Brooks Houck, a local businessman from a well-known Bardstown family. Outwardly, theirs looked like a typical relationship. Pictures of family outings, shared responsibilities, the daily ebb and flow of raising children together. But those close to Crystal would later recall small cracks beneath the surface. She had begun confiding in relatives about tension at home, arguments that never seemed to end, and a growing unease she couldn't quite name. To her mother, Sherry Ballard, it sounded like ordinary relationship strain, but a mother's intuition always listens for the tone beneath the words, the hesitation, the forced reassurance. Looking back, Sherry would say she felt something in her bones that summer, a quiet anxiety she couldn't shake. The first days of July 2015 carried the usual holiday excitement. Downtown Bardstown, with its red brick storefronts and old courthouse square, was buzzing with preparations for the Independence Day parade. Flags hung from lampposts. Children ran through sprinklers. The bourbon distilleries on the outskirts of town, Heaven Hill, Willett, Barton, 1792, perfumed the air with that familiar sweet grain scent. The whole town seemed to pulse with easy familiarity, yet under that postcard calm lay memories of violence that Bardstown had not yet processed. Just 2 years earlier, in 2013, Officer Jason Ellis had been ambushed and killed on his way home from duty, an unsolved murder that left residents uneasy. A year after that, in 2014, Kathy and Samantha Netherland, a mother and daughter, were brutally slain inside their home. Those cases had never been solved. So when Crystal disappeared in 2015, many locals whispered that Bardstown was once again cursed, that something dark was lingering in its quiet hills. July 3rd should have been like any other summer Friday. Crystal spent part of the day with her family, running errands and talking about plans for the weekend. That evening, she was last seen alive at the home she shared with Brooks. According to him, she stayed up playing games on her phone while he went to bed. When he woke the next morning, he claimed she was gone. To some, that explanation felt strangely hollow, but at the time there was no reason to question it. People disappear for many reasons: arguments, stress, a need for space. But Crystal wasn't the kind of person who simply walked away, especially not from her children. When she didn't return home that night, her family's concern grew. The following morning, there was still no sign of her. Calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages showed as delivered but unread. Her social media accounts, normally active, fell silent. Hours stretched into a day, then another. Sherry Ballard began calling hospitals, jails, anyone who might have seen her daughter. No one had. By Sunday, July 5th, 2 days after she was last seen, Sherry made the decision no parent ever wants to face. She reported Crystal missing. That same afternoon, a discovery would confirm her worst fears. On the shoulder of Bluegrass Parkway, just east of town near mile marker 14, a passing motorist noticed a maroon 2007 Chevrolet Impala with a flat tire. The car appeared abandoned, baking in the Kentucky sun. When deputies arrived, they found Crystal's purse, cell phone, and car keys still inside. The driver's seat was empty, the air inside stiflingly hot, the silence broken only by the low hum of cicadas in the nearby trees. There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints leading away, no blood, no note. The car looked as if its owner had stepped out for a moment and simply evaporated. News spread through Bardstown within hours. Sherry Ballard and family members rushed to the scene. Sherry stood by the guardrail staring at her daughter's car, its paint glinting in the late-day light, and she felt the ground slip from beneath her. She later recalled that instant as the moment she knew Crystal wasn't coming home. For investigators, the scene was both baffling and hauntingly empty. Cars break down every day, but people don't leave behind everything they own. Not their phone, not their wallet, not their life. Officers photographed, bagged, and towed the vehicle, hoping the answers were somewhere inside. But those answers, it seemed, were already gone with Crystal. In a matter of hours, Bardstown transformed from festive to fearful. Flyers with Crystal's smiling face appeared in storefront windows. Volunteers gathered at the community park with flashlights and maps. Hundreds joined search parties, neighbors, church members, even strangers from nearby counties. They trudged through fields, along creek beds, and into dense woods, calling her name until their voices grew hoarse. The Kentucky State Police coordinated with local volunteers, while friends organized social media pages dedicated to finding Crystal. It became a collective mission, a whole town clinging to hope. As the days wore on, hope collided with exhaustion. Each evening, searchers would return empty-handed, their boots caked with mud, faces streaked with sweat and worry. Sherry Ballard never stopped coordinating efforts. She refused to rest, convinced that her daughter was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Friends described her as tireless, driving back roads long after dark, talking to anyone who might have seen something, retracing every step Crystal could have taken. Meanwhile, local news stations began covering the disappearance around the clock. Reporters interviewed neighbors, friends, and police. The story resonated beyond Bardstown's borders. A mother of 5 missing without explanation. An abandoned car. A community haunted by unsolved crimes. National outlets soon picked it up, and what had started as a local worry became a statewide search for answers. Yet, even in those early days, an uncomfortable question hung in the air, one that few dared to speak publicly. Had Crystal's disappearance been voluntary, or had something far darker occurred? Whispers began pointing toward the person who had last seen her alive, her boyfriend, Brooks Houck. As family members organized searches, Houck's demeanor struck some as detached. He insisted he had nothing to hide, that Crystal must have gone off on her own. But, as investigators would soon learn, nothing about Crystal's life suggested she would ever leave her children behind. Still, in early July, no one could know where the trail would lead. For now, all Bardstown had were questions, and an image burned into memory, that Impala, stranded under the relentless sun, holding the echoes of a vanished life. It wasn't just a missing person case, it was the first crack in Bardstown's fragile sense of safety. And as the sun set over the rolling hills that week, the town that prided itself on bourbon and hospitality began to feel something else entirely: fear. Because if Crystal Rogers could disappear from Bardstown without a trace, then maybe no one was truly safe at all. What could have happened that night to change everything so suddenly? The search for Crystal Rogers quickly consumed Bardstown. By the end of that first week in July 2015, the once celebratory town had become a field command post, a grid of volunteers, patrol cars, and reporters chasing the same impossible question: where is Crystal? At the center of it all was her mother, Sherry Ballard. Her face, lined with exhaustion but unwavering, became the symbol of the search. She refused to sleep more than a few hours at a time. If someone was looking for her daughter, she wanted to be there. From dawn to nightfall, she drove through winding back roads, past cornfields and farmhouses, scanning ditches, wooded ravines, and the edges of creeks. Every rustle in the underbrush sent her heart racing. The Kentucky summer was merciless, temperatures pushing 90, humidity thick as syrup, but the volunteers kept coming. Off-duty firefighters, high school coaches, church groups, even strangers from neighboring counties joined in. They mapped out grids, logged coordinates, marked cleared areas with orange tape. A few searched on horseback, others with ATVs and drones. The collective hope was that maybe, just maybe, she was out there, hurt, disoriented, but alive. At the same time, investigators were quietly following another trail, one that led not through fields but through relationships. From the moment police arrived at the scene of Crystal's abandoned car, something about the case felt different. There was no sign of forced entry, no damage suggesting a robbery or carjacking. Her belongings were neatly placed inside the vehicle, as if she had stepped out intentionally, expecting to return. That single detail unsettled detectives. When questioned, Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend, offered a calm and consistent story. He said that on the night of July 3rd, the two had spent the evening at home with their 2-year-old son. Around 11 p.m., he claimed, he went to bed while Crystal stayed awake playing games on her phone. When he woke the next morning, she and her car were gone. At first, he assumed she had gone to her cousin's house or run errands, but when she didn't return by nightfall, he admitted to being mildly concerned. To Crystal's family, that indifference felt unbearable. Mildly concerned, Sherry later recalled. A mother of 5 doesn't vanish and you just wait around. Still, at that early stage, there was little hard evidence of foul play. Police collected Crystal's car, processed fingerprints, and examined her phone. Nothing conclusive emerged. Her last known digital activity was around midnight on July 3rd, a short window that would become the cornerstone of the investigation. As hours turned to days, tension between Crystal's family and Brooks deepened. He rarely joined the public searches, claiming he was letting law enforcement handle it. When he did appear, his demeanor seemed detached, no tears, no visible panic. Reporters noted his calm, almost clinical tone in interviews. For Sherry, that composure was infuriating. She didn't expect him to break down, but she couldn't understand how he seemed so untouched. By mid-July, the Nelson County Sheriff's Office had brought in outside agencies for support. Detectives conducted door-to-door interviews, rechecked alibis, and reviewed surveillance footage from businesses near Bluegrass Parkway. But Bardstown is surrounded by miles of open country, rolling farmland, thick woods, narrow creeks. A person could vanish out there, and the earth itself would keep the secret. On July 8th, less than a week after the disappearance, Brooks agreed to take a polygraph test. Detectives hoped the results might clarify inconsistencies in his account. But when the test concluded, something strange happened. Kentucky State Police later confirmed that Brooks was not cooperative during the process. According to the examiner, his behavior compromised the results. He left without completing a valid test. The following day, the tone of the investigation shifted. The sheriff's office publicly named Brooks Houck as the primary suspect in Crystal Rogers' disappearance, though he was not charged. The announcement stunned Bardstown. Brooks insisted on his innocence, telling reporters that he was being unfairly targeted because he was the boyfriend. But behind the scenes, detectives were uncovering disturbing details about the hours surrounding Crystal's disappearance. Phone records placed Brooks at home that night, consistent with his story. But another person's movements, his brother, Nick Houck, a Bardstown police officer, raised new questions. According to investigators, Nick had called Brooks shortly after being interviewed by state police. During that call, he allegedly warned his brother that detectives were getting suspicious. Not long after, Brooks removed several items from his property, including what appeared to be tools and personal items later described as potential evidence. When questioned, Nick invoked his right to remain silent. Within days, he was suspended from the Bardstown Police Department and later terminated for interference in an active investigation. It was a scandal that shook the department and added a shadow of corruption to the already troubled case. While investigators navigated the Houck brothers' inconsistencies, Sherry Ballard focused on what mattered most: bringing her daughter home. She organized vigils, coordinated with volunteers, and spoke to every reporter who would listen. Each time she appeared on camera, her message was the same: "We won't stop until we find Crystal. Somebody out there knows what happened." Her faith became the community's compass. Churches hosted prayer circles. Businesses donated food and supplies to search teams. Volunteers combed miles of farmland along the St. Thomas area, where Brooks's family owned property. The Ballards spent days knocking on doors, asking farmers to check barns, ponds, wells, and old sheds. At one point, Sherry even approached Brooks directly. She asked him to sit down and talk, to walk her through every detail of that night, hoping she might hear something new. But the conversation went nowhere. She described him as emotionless, unwilling to engage, answering every question with a shrug or a deflection. Her frustration turned into determination. If the system couldn't bring answers, she would find them herself. In late July 2015, investigators turned their attention to the Houck family farm, a sprawling property on the outskirts of Bardstown that had come up repeatedly in interviews. Cadaver dogs were brought in, along with forensic teams and ground-penetrating radar. Detectives spent hours combing through barns, digging small sections of land, and scanning ponds. News helicopters hovered overhead. The search drew massive public attention, not just because of the potential breakthrough, but because Brooks himself was seen on site, calmly watching from a distance. Cameras caught him pacing with his arms folded, expression unreadable. Despite the thorough effort, no human remains or direct evidence were found. But the search did yield one item of interest: an industrial-sized roll of plastic sheeting found on the property, similar to the kind used in construction or to cover soil. Detectives seized it for testing, though the results were never publicly disclosed. Without a body, the investigation remained trapped in limbo. Circumstantial suspicion, but no physical proof. Yet to Bardstown, the conclusion was already forming. Something terrible had happened, and the answers lay closer to home than anyone wanted to admit. By August, the town's landscape had changed. Where parade banners once hung, there were now missing person posters. Crystal's face smiled from bulletin boards, gas stations, and the side of delivery trucks. The phrase "bring Crystal home" became part of the local vocabulary. Children wore bracelets with her name. Restaurants hosted fundraiser nights for search supplies. The case seemed to echo Bardstown's previous tragedies, each one unresolved, each one leaving behind a hollow silence. People began drawing uneasy parallels. Officer Jason Ellis, ambushed on a highway in 2013, the Netherlands murders in 2014, and now Crystal Rogers, missing from the same small radius. Some locals even whispered about a Bardstown curse, though investigators rejected that theory. Still, the pattern was impossible to ignore: a growing list of unanswered crimes that eroded trust in law enforcement and left residents questioning how much they truly knew about their own town. Through all of it, Sherry Ballard refused to give up. She opened a command center in town, turning a small building into the headquarters for volunteers. Inside, maps covered the walls, dotted with color-coded pins marking every search zone. Tables were stacked with files, notebooks, and local tips scribbled on sticky notes. Every morning, Sherry would start with a prayer, gather volunteers, and brief them on new areas to cover. Reporters often described her as both gentle and fierce, a woman driven not by anger, but by the need for truth. She believed someone in Bardstown knew what happened, and she refused to let time bury her daughter's memory. "I know my daughter," she told one interviewer. She didn't walk away, someone took her from us. As summer gave way to fall, the leaves around Bardstown began to turn, crimson and gold against a deep blue sky. But for Crystal's family, the change of seasons meant nothing. Each day blurred into the next. More searches, more interviews, more silence. By October 2015, investigators admitted publicly what many had already assumed. Crystal Rogers was presumed dead. It was no longer a missing person investigation, but a probable homicide. Yet there was still no arrest, no body, and no closure, only grief, and the uneasy knowledge that Bardstown was keeping another secret. The search had begun with hope, but by autumn it had become something else. A test of endurance, a mother's faith against the weight of silence. And just when the Ballard family thought they had endured the worst, tragedy would strike again, in a way no one could have predicted. By the time the calendar turned to August 2015, Bardstown was no longer the same small town that had once defined itself by bourbon, bluegrass, and Sunday gatherings. Instead, it had become a community frozen in unease. Every whispered rumor, every locked door, every flicker of headlights after dark carried the same question. Where is Crystal Rogers? Detectives from the Nelson County Sheriff's Office, along with Kentucky State Police, worked around the clock. The once quiet department suddenly found itself buried under hundreds of tips. The fields near the Bluegrass Parkway became a revolving scene of search parties. Officers, volunteers, and drones scanning the same stretch of land over and over again. The community gathered daily at the local Walmart parking lot, setting up tents and distributing flyers bearing Crystal's smiling face. The poster became impossible to ignore. Her warm brown eyes, her long blonde hair, and that confident, easy smile that once lit up every room. Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, became the face of a mother's unrelenting hope. Each morning, she'd arrive at the command center with coffee for the volunteers, clutching her phone as if the next call might finally bring the words she'd been praying for. We found her. Instead, the days stretched into weeks. The heat of the Kentucky summer faded into a heavy silence, and Sherry's eyes grew tired, her voice thinner but never defeated. The early days of the investigation turned toward the person closest to Crystal, her longtime boyfriend, Brooks Houck. At first, he seemed calm in front of the cameras, appearing on local news stations and insisting he had no idea what happened to her. But to detectives, something felt off. His story was too neat, too carefully measured. Brooks told police that Crystal had been playing games on her phone when he fell asleep around midnight on July 3, 2015. When he woke up, she was gone. No argument, no sound, just gone. But investigators quickly discovered gaps in his story. Crystal's car had been found unlocked, her keys and phone still inside, and yet Brooks hadn't reported her missing. It was Sherry who raised the alarm, not him. Detective John Snow of the Nelson County Sheriff's Office, no relation to the fictional character who would later make headlines simply because of his name, took the lead on the case. His gut told him this wasn't a disappearance by choice. He spent hours rewatching Brooks's interviews, looking for small inconsistencies. One, in particular, stood out. Brooks seemed more concerned about being harassed by police than about the fact that the mother of his child was missing. In a now famous interview with local station WAS 11, Brooks's composure began to crack. When asked if he had anything to do with Crystal's disappearance, his tone hardened. Absolutely not. I have absolutely no reason to hurt that girl. I have nothing to hide. But it was his behavior off camera that raised more suspicion. Detectives learned that Brooks had contacted his brother, Nick Houck, a Bardstown police officer, shortly after Crystal disappeared. Records later revealed that Nick warned Brooks to protect himself, a chilling piece of advice that would eventually cost him his job. Investigators allege that Nick may have interfered with the case, possibly discouraging Brooks from cooperating. Within weeks, Nick Houck was interviewed by investigators himself. His story was evasive, his tone defensive. When asked if he'd spoken with his brother about the investigation, he admitted they'd talked, but refused to elaborate. Polygraph tests later showed significant deception. The Bardstown Police Department eventually fired him, citing misconduct and obstruction concerns. Meanwhile, the searches continued. Detectives scoured the Houck family farm, located about 15 miles from Bardstown. The sprawling land, surrounded by rolling hills and thick woods, became the center of suspicion. Cadaver dogs hit on multiple areas, signals that something was buried or decomposing. Excavation crews brought in heavy equipment, digging deep into the soil, but no remains were found. For Sherry and the volunteers, each search felt like both hope and heartbreak. Hope that Crystal might finally be found. Heartbreak that every lead ended in silence. "It's like the ground won't give her back," Sherry told a local reporter, her voice trembling but steady. The case soon drew national attention. News outlets across the country descended on Bardstown, linking Crystal's disappearance to a disturbing pattern of unsolved deaths in the same small town. Jason Ellis, a Bardstown police officer, ambushed and murdered in 2013. Kathy and Samantha Netherland, a mother and daughter, brutally killed in 2014. Now, in 2015, Crystal Rogers had vanished, and the community whispered about a curse, a darkness that seemed to hang over Bardstown. Bardstown used to be known for bourbon, one resident told CNN. Now, it's known for murder. As detectives pressed forward, the tension between the Ballard family and the Houck family deepened. Sherry, once polite and restrained, began publicly naming Brooks as the main suspect. "He's the last person to see her alive," she said bluntly. "I don't care what he says, he knows something." Brooks responded by filing harassment complaints and avoiding public events. He maintained his innocence, insisting that Crystal's disappearance had nothing to do with him. But when investigators subpoenaed his phone records, they noticed gaps. Times when his phone appeared to have been turned off or left idle in unusual locations. In October 2015, a massive search effort was launched on farmland owned by the Houcks. Volunteers, police, and the FBI all took part. Helicopters hovered overhead, and dozens of cars lined the rural road leading to the property. It felt, for a brief moment, like they might finally uncover the truth. But after 2 days of searching, they came up empty-handed. As one volunteer put it, "You start thinking maybe they moved her. Maybe they'll never let her be found." By the end of the year, Crystal's case had gone cold. There were no arrests, no body, and no confirmed evidence of foul play, yet everyone in Bardstown knew the truth. Something terrible had happened. The whispers never stopped, the theories multiplied, and the Ballard family's determination only grew stronger. Sherry began holding candlelight vigils downtown, where people prayed, sang, and shared stories of Crystal, her stubbornness, her laughter, her love for her kids. "I'll never stop," Sherry told the crowd. "Until I find her, I'll never stop." Detectives continued chasing leads into 2016 and 2017. The FBI became more involved, using drones, ground-penetrating radar, and advanced forensics to re-examine the original search sites. They interviewed new witnesses and revisited old ones. In 2020, 5 years after Crystal vanished, the FBI took full control of the investigation, designating it a federal case. Dozens of search warrants were executed, focusing again on the Houck family farm and related properties. In those years of waiting, frustration grew. Sherry Ballard attended nearly every public meeting about the case, often standing beside photos of both Crystal and Tommy Ballard, her husband and Crystal's father, who would later become another tragic figure in this story. But that heartbreak was still to come. Even in its early stages, the investigation had already torn open the soul of Bardstown. The people no longer looked at each other with the same warmth. Suspicion replaced small talk. The once bustling town square, with its antique shops and bourbon tours, now felt haunted by absence, an invisible weight pressing down on every conversation. And for viewers watching now, it's hard not to ask, how could someone make a woman vanish so completely, in a place where everyone knew her name? Could it be that Crystal's disappearance was not an isolated act, but part of something deeper, a chain of silence that had already claimed others before her. The years after Crystal's disappearance were marked by silence, but not the kind that fades with time. It was the heavy living silence of unanswered questions and sleepless nights. For most, the case had become another unsolved mystery in a town already burdened with them. But for one man, that silence became a calling. His name was Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, a quiet, steadfast man who had once lived a simple life, working and raising his family in the heart of Nelson County. But when his daughter vanished, Tommy became something else entirely. A detective, a tracker, and a voice that refused to be silenced. Each morning, before sunrise, Tommy would drive the same routes that investigators had once searched. His truck, old and worn, became a familiar sight on the rural backroads of Bardstown. He carried maps, binoculars, and a worn notebook full of theories, hand-drawn sketches, distances, and names. His mind never rested. Every patch of woods, every creek bed, every abandoned structure was a possibility. Neighbors often said you could tell when Tommy was out searching. His headlights would cut across the misty fields long before dawn, a lone figure combing through the dark. He told friends that he couldn't stop, not when his daughter was still out there somewhere. "I know she didn't just walk away," he said. "Somebody knows. And I'm going to find out who." Sherry often joined him. Together, they placed new flyers, revisited old leads, and spoke with anyone who might have seen something that night in July 2015. The pain had aged them both, but their resolve only hardened. "We're not waiting on miracles," Tommy once said to a local reporter. "We're doing the work ourselves." By 2016, the Ballards had become the driving force behind keeping Crystal's story alive. They organized fundraisers, built search teams, and maintained a Facebook page dedicated to her case. Tommy even purchased property near where Crystal's car had been found, determined to make sure no one ever forgot that spot. "This is where her trail went cold," he said, "so this is where we'll keep the light burning." But beneath Tommy's determination was a growing frustration with the pace of the investigation. He felt that too much had been left unanswered, too many clues unchased, too many connections ignored. The suspicion that Brooks Houck and his family knew more than they were saying haunted him daily. "They're walking free," he told friends, "and my daughter's gone. How can that be right?" Then came November 19th, 2016, a morning that would change everything once again. It was a crisp autumn Saturday, quiet and still. The sky hung gray over the farmland off Ed Brent Road, where Tommy and his grandson had gone deer hunting. The boy was only 12, and Tommy had promised it would be a peaceful morning together. Just family time away from the constant search and sorrow. At around 8 a.m., a single gunshot echoed across the rolling fields. It wasn't the sound of a hunter's deliberate aim. It was a sharp, unexpected crack that startled neighbors and left the air eerily still. When first responders arrived, they found Tommy Ballard lying on the ground near his truck, a gunshot wound to the chest. His grandson stood nearby, shaken and terrified. Tommy Ballard was dead. The news spread through Bardstown like wildfire. For a town still haunted by Crystal's disappearance, it felt like losing her all over again. Sherry's voice broke when reporters arrived. "First, my daughter," she whispered, "and now my husband." Investigators quickly ruled the case suspicious. There was no evidence that the shot was self-inflicted, and no signs of a hunting accident. The shot had come from an unknown distance, deliberate, calculated, and devastatingly effective. The man, who had spent every waking moment searching for his missing daughter, had now become another unsolved mystery in the same cursed town. As the days turned to weeks, the FBI joined local law enforcement at the scene, canvassing the area and interviewing witnesses. But just like with Crystal, answers proved elusive. There were no arrests, no weapon recovered, and no known motive beyond the chilling possibility that Tommy had been silenced for getting too close to the truth. Sherry later said she believed it was no coincidence. "He was shot in cold blood because he wouldn't stop looking for Crystal," she said. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." The It was a theory that many in Bardstown quietly agreed with, though few dared say it out loud. By the end of 2016, Bardstown was gripped by fear and exhaustion. In 3 short years, the community had seen 4 high-profile killings and 1 disappearance, all unsolved, all seemingly connected by the same air of secrecy and corruption. Locals began to refer to it as the Bardstown curse. But even amid despair, the Ballard family refused to let Crystal or Tommy fade into memory. Sherry became the face of both tragedies, speaking at rallies, giving interviews, and demanding accountability. "I've lost my daughter and my husband," she told a local news crew, "but I won't lose this fight. I can't." The FBI, now fully in control of both investigations, released a statement in 2020 reaffirming their commitment to finding the truth. They launched new searches on properties connected to the Houck family, including the one owned by Brooks. Investigators brought in specialized equipment, ground-penetrating radar, and cadaver dogs, the same tools Tommy had dreamed of using himself. Residents watched as agents combed through the farm, marking off grids, digging up soil. Some hoped it would finally bring closure. Others feared it would only deepen the town's grief. No remains were found, but the message was clear. The case was far from forgotten. Over time, Sherry turned her pain into purpose. She founded awareness drives, community walks, and public events to honor both Crystal and Tommy. Each year, on the anniversary of Crystal's disappearance, dozens of people gather at the site where her car was found. They light candles, release balloons, and share stories about the woman who had become the symbol of Bardstown's resilience. "Every candle we light," Sherry said, "is a promise that we'll keep searching." And yet, the shadow of Tommy's death looms large. His case, like Crystal's, remains unsolved. The FBI continues to treat it as suspicious, leaving open the haunting possibility that both father and daughter were targeted. One vanished without a trace, the other silenced when he refused to give up. Even now, the people of Bardstown speak of Tommy Ballard with reverence. His friends call him the town's conscience, a man who carried the weight of justice when no one else could, a man who searched for truth until the very end. For those watching, Tommy's story forces a deeper reflection. How far would you go to find the truth if it meant risking everything? Would you keep searching, even when the answers seem determined to hide forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Tommy Ballard's death was connected to Crystal's disappearance, or was it a tragic coincidence in a town already burdened with too many mysteries? The morning of Brooks Houck's arrest in 2023 carried an almost cinematic weight over Bardstown. After nearly 8 years of searching, waiting, and hoping, the small Kentucky town awoke to the sound of law enforcement activity that would mark a turning point in Crystal Rogers' long-unsolved disappearance. Black SUVs and unmarked cars lined the quiet streets near Brooks' construction office, while agents moved with precision, executing the culmination of years of meticulous investigation. For many, it was hard to believe that this day had finally arrived. The man who had once been the last person to see Crystal alive was now formally charged with her murder, a moment that sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. The arrest itself was the result of painstaking work. The FBI, along with state and local investigators, had spent the previous 3 years revisiting every detail, following up on previously overlooked leads, and analyzing digital evidence with modern forensic tools. Cell phone records, GPS data, and financial transactions were cross-referenced, and inconsistencies in Brooks' statements over the years began to form a pattern too significant to ignore. Witnesses, who had once been silent or hesitant to speak, were encouraged by the renewed federal involvement to share their accounts, offering corroboration of events that had long been clouded by ambiguity. Each piece of evidence, while seemingly small on its own, coalesced into a chain linking Brooks Houck directly to the crime. The arrest did not immediately reveal Crystal's whereabouts. Even with the charge, her body had yet to be found. But the filing signaled a shift. The legal system was finally addressing a case that had lingered unresolved for nearly a decade. For Sherry Ballard, the mother who had been a tireless advocate for her daughter, the news was bittersweet. Relief and hope were tempered by grief and lingering questions. "I've waited so long to hear that name in connection with my daughter's case," she told reporters, her voice steady yet heavy with emotion. "But I still want Crystal home. That's what matters most." Community reaction was immediate and widespread. Neighbors, friends, and volunteers who had dedicated years to the search for Crystal shared a sense of cautious optimism. Local news outlets carried images of the arrest, while online communities that had followed the case for years debated the implications. People who had feared the investigation had gone cold began to feel that justice might finally prevail. Vigils were held across town, combining remembrance of Crystal and acknowledgement of the tenacity of those who had refused to let her story fade. Legal proceedings followed swiftly. Brooks Houck was arraigned in a Nelson County courtroom, where the gravity of the charges was made clear. The indictment outlined his alleged role in Crystal's disappearance and death, providing a factual record based on years of investigation and collected evidence. The courtroom, packed with media and onlookers, was a space charged with tension and emotion. Family members, including Sherry Ballard, attended the proceedings, their presence a reminder of the human cost behind every legal document and line of evidence. During pretrial hearings, prosecutors detailed the evidence that led to the charges. This included both previously overlooked material and the findings of federal investigators who had reanalyzed the case with modern forensic technology. While specifics of the evidence were protected to maintain the integrity of ongoing proceedings, the public record confirmed a clear trajectory from disappearance to arrest. Defense attorneys, as expected, began preparing motions and raising procedural challenges, but the arrest itself had already reshaped the narrative of a case that had once seemed impossibly stalled. Throughout the trial preparation, the community continued to grapple with the broader impact of the case. Bardstown, already marked by a series of tragic incidents, was once again focused on the question of accountability. The arrest served as a reminder that cold cases are not permanently frozen in time. With persistence, modern investigative methods, and public pressure, even the most complex disappearances can progress toward resolution. For law enforcement, it underscored the value of revisiting old evidence and re-engaging witnesses who may have been reluctant or fearful in the past. Emotional closure for the family remains complex. While Brooks Houck's arrest represents a significant milestone, Crystal's absence continues to weigh heavily on those who loved her. Sherry Ballard has stated publicly that her hope remains for the recovery of her daughter's remains, to allow for a proper memorial and personal closure. The arrest, while monumental, is part of a broader process, a journey toward justice that extends beyond court dates and indictments to the restoration of some measure of peace for a grieving family. For the wider public and followers of true crime, the case exemplifies both the perseverance of families and the evolving power of forensic science. The breakthrough, culminating in the arrest, demonstrates how modern technology, persistent investigation, and community engagement can overcome years of inaction or stagnation. Moreover, it highlights the crucial role that family members play in keeping cases alive, advocating for justice, and ensuring that no disappearance is forgotten. Even as legal proceedings continue, the narrative of Crystal Rogers' case has already left an indelible mark on Bardstown and on the broader conversation about missing persons and cold cases. Citizens, volunteers, and investigators alike have been reminded of the importance of vigilance, the potential for breakthroughs even after long periods of uncertainty, and the enduring human need for answers. For viewers reflecting on this chapter of the story, the questions are both practical and philosophical. What does it take to bring long unresolved cases to light? How can communities and families ensure that investigations do not stagnate? And, perhaps most poignantly, what does justice look like when the person at the heart of a crime remains missing? The arrest and ongoing trial of Brooks Houck mark a pivotal moment in Crystal Rogers' story, a point where persistence, forensic science, and community dedication converge to demand accountability. While the outcome of court proceedings will further define the case, the significance of the breakthrough resonates beyond the legal system. It serves as a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth and the refusal to allow a case to remain cold indefinitely. Share your thoughts in the comments. What impact do you think this arrest will have on the family, the community, and the broader fight for justice in cold cases? Could this case set a precedent for how long unsolved disappearances are handled in small towns? The story of Crystal Rogers extends far beyond the streets of Bardstown, Kentucky. It is a story marked by grief, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of justice that spans nearly a decade. For her family, the disappearance of Crystal was not simply a tragic incident. It became a lifelong mission to uncover the truth. Each day brought the weight of unanswered questions. Each year intensified the longing for resolution, and every small lead became a beacon of hope in a world shadowed by uncertainty. The absence of Crystal transformed lives. Her children, her parents, and everyone who knew her were forced to navigate a reality shaped by fear, doubt, and profound sorrow. Her mother, Sherry Ballard, embodies the resilience and determination that define this story. From the earliest days following Crystal's disappearance, Sherry refused to let the case fade into obscurity. She organized searches, placed flyers, spoke with reporters, and engaged the community in relentless advocacy. Every action she took was a tangible demonstration of her unwavering commitment to her daughter. Sherry became the central voice keeping Crystal's story alive, advocating for law enforcement attention and maintaining public awareness. Her advocacy was more than mere persistence. It was a moral demand that the truth be pursued, no matter the years that passed or the obstacles that arose. The loss of Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, deepened the emotional stakes of this case. His untimely death in 2016, during his tireless personal search for his daughter, left a void in the family and the community. Tommy's relentless commitment to finding Crystal was emblematic of a man who refused to accept the impossible. A man who risked his own safety and ultimately gave his life to pursue justice. His memory continues to resonate in Bardstown, as the residents recall his presence on rural roads at dawn, searching for clues, confronting despair with determination, and inspiring a community to act. The combined advocacy of Sherry and the legacy of Tommy underscores how personal loss can fuel a profound, sustained pursuit of truth. Bardstown itself carries the imprint of this case. Once a town defined by its historic charm and quiet streets, it became a focal point for national attention as the disappearance of Crystal Rogers and the subsequent tragedy of Tommy Ballard unfolded. Community members, from neighbors to volunteers, played a critical role in keeping the case alive. Searches through fields, forests, and abandoned properties were often led by ordinary citizens unwilling to accept uncertainty. Local media outlets chronicled each development, maintaining public awareness and amplifying the voices of the family. Vigils and commemorative gatherings became regular events, reflecting both sorrow and hope, and demonstrating the collective commitment of a community that refused to allow a young mother's disappearance to be forgotten. The breakthrough in 2023, the arrest of Brooks Houck, marked a pivotal moment. While the legal process is ongoing, it represents the culmination of years of methodical investigation and persistent advocacy. Federal and state investigators, armed with modern forensic technology, re-examined old evidence, re-interviewed witnesses, and connected dots that had previously remained hidden. The arrest was not simply a legal development. It symbolized a victory for persistence, community involvement, and the tireless effort of families refusing to let a case die cold. For the Rogers family and the broader community, it reaffirmed that truth, no matter how delayed, can still prevail. Yet, the case also demonstrates the emotional complexity of seeking justice when the central figure remains missing. Crystal's remains have not yet been recovered, and until that moment, full closure remains unattainable. For Sherry, every new lead, every court appearance, and every media update is tempered by the reminder that her daughter's physical presence has not been restored. The grief of loss, coupled with the slow pace of legal proceedings, highlights the enduring human cost of unresolved disappearances. It is a cost borne not only by the immediate family but by a community whose collective empathy and participation have helped sustain the search for answers. From a broader perspective, the case underscores critical lessons for law enforcement and families nationwide. Cold cases, by their nature, test the limits of resources, patience, and investigative ingenuity. The Crystal Rogers case demonstrates the importance of revisiting old evidence with new technology, leveraging digital forensic advancements, and maintaining ongoing public engagement. It shows that persistence, when combined with methodical investigative techniques, can overcome years of stagnation. For families, the case illustrates that advocacy is essential, that refusing to let a case fade into obscurity is often what drives breakthroughs and ensures accountability. The legacy of the Rogers case also extends to community awareness and social responsibility. Bardstown, through collective effort, became more than a backdrop to tragedy. It became a model for community involvement in missing person cases. Neighborhoods, volunteers, and local organizations worked together to sustain searches, organize vigils, and maintain public attention. Social media campaigns amplified the story, drawing national interest and ensuring that the case remained in the spotlight. This level of engagement demonstrates how communities can serve as vital partners in the pursuit of justice, providing both practical support and emotional sustenance to families navigating prolonged uncertainty. The moral and philosophical resonance of the case is equally significant. Crystal Rogers' story invites reflection on themes of resilience, responsibility, and justice. It asks, how far would one go to find a loved one? What responsibilities do families, communities, and law enforcement bear in ensuring that disappearances are not forgotten? How does the passage of time affect both grief and the pursuit of truth? These questions linger, not only for those directly involved, but for anyone who witnesses or engages with this story. It is a story that resonates universally, transcending the specifics of Bardstown to illuminate broader truths about human determination and moral accountability. As legal proceedings continue, the case's impact remains ongoing. Investigators continue to analyze evidence, explore additional leads, and anticipate further developments that may bring more clarity. The arrest of Brooks Houck represents a significant milestone, but it is part of a larger continuum, a process that includes forensic verification, court deliberations, and, ultimately, the hope of locating Crystal herself. For the Rogers family, each step forward carries the potential for resolution, even as the emotional journey remains fraught with uncertainty and sorrow. For viewers following this story, the lessons are clear. Perseverance can triumph over time, advocacy can influence investigations, and communities play a vital role in maintaining momentum in unresolved cases. Crystal Rogers' story is a testament to the enduring power of human effort, the necessity of institutional diligence, and the unbreakable bond between family and truth. Every vigil, every news update, and every public appeal reinforces the significance of her life and the imperative to see justice served. In honoring Crystal Rogers and Tommy Ballard, we are reminded that disappearance and loss are not simply events to be documented. They are lived experiences that shape families, communities, and the moral consciousness of society. They are reminders of the fragility of life, the weight of unanswered questions, and the profound courage required to confront enduring uncertainty. The case remains a compelling illustration of how hope, persistence, and collective action can eventually yield answers, even when faced with years of darkness and despair. The legacy of this case will continue to unfold, both in the courtroom and within the hearts of those who fought tirelessly for Crystal's truth. It demonstrates that while closure may be delayed, justice is not rendered impossible. Families who refuse to give up, communities that remain vigilant, and investigators committed to truth are often the catalysts for breakthroughs in even the most complex, long-standing cases. Crystal Rogers' story, while marked by tragedy, ultimately reflects the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of determination. It is a story of hope intertwined with grief, of advocacy paired with sorrow, and of justice pursued against nearly insurmountable odds. Her life, her disappearance, and the ongoing search for truth serve as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, a reminder that persistence, compassion, and courage can overcome years of silence. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the search for justice and the untold stories behind each case. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more revealed crime stories, and we'll see you in the next one.